Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi there.
And happy Ash Wednesday, because this will be on Ash Wednesday. So happy Lent.
Happy Lent.
Emily and I are going to do something a little bit different. Well, not totally different because we did Humani Vitae already, but there's another encyclical we're going to read together over the course of Lent called Familiaris Consortio. And just as a little caveat or a little caveat, disclaimer, that's the right word, disclaimer. Emily and I are not theologians, if you haven't figured that out already by listening to our podcast. We're just lay women who really love our faith and love the church so very much and have gotten so much from it, and have not been very diligent in reading all of the encyclicals.
That's correct.
And so we're going to use this podcast as a platform to read a couple. And we really enjoyed Humani Vitae. And so we decided to do Familiaris Consortio because this is an apostolic exhortation put out by Saint Pope John Paul II. It was released in 1981, and it was written in response to the 1980 Synod of Bishops that focused on the role of the Christian family in the modern world. And given the focus of our podcast, the NFP podcast, where we talk about marriage and family, we thought it would be really applicable to ourselves personally and hopefully to anyone who's listening who also hasn't been able to read this encyclical. And it says, it just as a little background on the document, the Familiaris Consortio is one of the most comprehensive documents on the Catholic Church's relationship to the family. Again, it was released in 1981 on the Feast of Christ the King, November 22nd. Which, just a little side note, my husband and I, that's when we connected, was on the Feast of Christ the King.
Oh, that's so sweet.
November, the end of November. Yeah, I remember because it was the first Mass of the new translation of the Mass.
Oh, okay.
Remember that
Yes.
launched the first, on the Feast of Christ the King that year, 2012.
Okay.
Is that right? No, 2011. 2011.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's kind of cool.
That's
Okay, so
cool.
yeah, so how we're going to do it is we'll read through. This is going to take us all through Lent, through Holy Week, and then that will be the last. Hopefully we'll end it there. So we'll just read like we did with Humani Vitae, and then if Emily and I have any thoughts, things stand out to us, we'll just share those like we do because we're just friends talking. So again, not experts, just reading and asking the Holy Spirit to lead us and open our hearts so we can better embrace our vocation and role in family life. So let's start. The Apostolic Exhortation Familiaris Consortio of Pope John Paul II to the Episcopate, to the clergy, and to the faithful of the whole Catholic Church on the role of the Christian family in the modern world. Introduction. The Church at the service of the family. The family in the modern world, as much as and perhaps more than any other institution, has been beset by the many profound and rapid changes that have affected society and culture. Many families are living in this situation in fidelity to those values that constitute the foundation of the institution of the family. Others have become uncertain and bewildered over their role, or even doubtful and almost unaware of the ultimate meaning and truth of conjugal and family life. Finally, there are others who have hindered by various situations of injustice in the realization of their fundamental rights. Knowing that marriage and the family constitute one of the most precious of human values, the Church wishes to speak and offer her help to those who are already aware of the value of marriage and family and seek to live it faithfully, to those who are uncertain and anxious and searching for the truth, and to those who are unjustly impeded from living freely their family lives. Supporting the first, illuminating the second, and assisting the others, the Church offers her services to every person who wonders about the destiny of marriage and the family. In a particular way, the Church addresses the young who are beginning their journey towards marriage and family life for the purpose of presenting them with new horizons, helping them to discover the beauty and grandeur of the vocation to love and the service of life.
The Synod of 1980 in continuity with preceding synods. Number 2, a sign of this profound interest of the Church in the family was the last Synod of Bishops held in Rome from September 26th to October 25th, 1980. This was a natural continuation of the 2 preceding synods. The Christian family, in fact, is the first community called to announce the gospel to the human person during growth and to bring him or her through a progressive education and catechesis to full human and Christian maturity. Furthermore, the recent synod is logically connected in some way as well with that on the ministerial priesthood and on justice in the modern world. In fact, as an educating community, the family must help man to discern his own vocation and to accept responsibility in the search for greater justice, educating him from the beginning in interpersonal relationships, rich in justice and in love. At the close of their assembly, the Synod Fathers presented me with a long list of proposals in which they had gathered the fruits of their reflections, which had matured over intense days of work. And they asked me unanimously to be a spokesman before humanity of the Church's lively care for the family and to give suitable indications for renewed pastoral effort in this fundamental sector of the life of man and of the Church. As I fulfill that mission with this exhortation, thus actuating in a particular matter the apostolic ministry with which I am entrusted, I wish to thank all the members of the Synod for the very valuable contribution of teaching and experience that they made, especially through the propositions, the text of which I am entrusting to the Pontifical Council for the Family, with instructions to study it so as to bring out every aspect of its rich content.
The precious value of marriage and of the family. Illuminated by the faith that gives her an understanding of all the truth concerning the great value of marriage and the family and their deepest meaning, the Church once again feels the pressing need to proclaim the gospel, that is, the good news, to all people without exception, in particular to all those who are called to marriage and are preparing for it, to all married couples and parents in the world. The Church is deeply convinced that only by the acceptance of the gospel are the hopes that man legitimately places in marriage and in the family capable of being fulfilled. Willed by God in the very act of creation, marriage and the family are interiorly ordained to fulfillment in Christ and have need of his graces in order to be healed from the wounds of sin and restored to their beginning, that is, to full understanding and the full realization of God's plan. At a moment of history in which the family is the object of numerous forces that seek to destroy it, or in some way to deform it, and aware that the well-being of society and her own good are intimately tied to the good of the family, the Church perceives in a more urgent and compelling way her mission of proclaiming to all the people the plan of God for marriage and the family, ensuring their full vitality and human and Christian development, and thus contributing to the renewal of society and of the people of God.
Part 1. Bright spots and shadows for the family today. The need to understand the situation. Since God's plan for marriage and the family touches men and women in the concreteness of their daily existence in specific social and cultural situations, the Church ought to apply herself to understanding the situations within which marriage and the family are lived today, in order to fulfill her task of serving. This understanding is, therefore, an inescapable requirement of the work of evangelization. It is, in fact, to the families of our times that the Church must bring the unchangeable and ever-new gospel of Jesus Christ, just as it is the families involved in the present conditions of the world that are called to accept and to live the plan of God that pertains to them. Moreover, the call and demands of the Spirit resound in the very events of history, and so the church can also be guided to a more profound understanding of the inexhaustible mystery of marriage and the family by the circumstances, the questions, and the anxieties and hopes of the young people, married couples, and parents of today. To this ought to be added a further reflection of particular importance at the present time. Not infrequently, ideas and solutions which are very appealing, but which obscure in varying degrees the truth and the dignity of the human person, are offered to the men and women of today, in their sincere and deep search for a response to the important daily problems that affect their married and family life. These views are often supported by the powerful and pervasive organization of the means of social communication, which subtly endanger freedom and the capacity for objective judgment. Many are already aware of this danger to the human person and are working for the truth. The Church, with her evangelical discernment, joins with them, offering her own service to the truth, to freedom, and to the dignity of every man and every woman.
Evangelical discernment. The discernment effected by the Church becomes the offering of an orientation in order that the entire truth and the full dignity of marriage and the family may be preserved and realized. This discernment is accomplished through the sense of faith, which is a gift that the Spirit gives to all the faithful, and is therefore the work of the whole Church, according to the diversity of the various gifts and charisms that, together with and according to the responsibility proper to each one, working together for a more profound understanding and activation of the Word of God, the Church, therefore, does not accomplish this discernment only through the pastors, who teach in the name and with the power of Christ, but also through the laity. Christ, quote, made them his witnesses and gave them understanding of the faith and the grace of speech, so that the power of the gospel might shine forth in their daily social and family life, end quote. The laity, moreover, by reason of their particular vocation, have the specific role of interpreting the history of the world in the light of Christ, inasmuch as they are called to illuminate and organize temporal realities according to the plan of God, Creator and Redeemer. The supernatural sense of faith, however, does not consist solely in or necessarily in the consensus of the faithful. Following Christ, the Church seeks the truth, which is not always the same as the majority opinion. She listens to conscience and not to power, and in this way she defends the poor and the downtrodden. The Church values sociological and statistical research when it proves helpful in understanding the historical context in which pastoral action has to be developed and when it leads to a better understanding of the truth. Such research alone, however, is not to be considered in itself an expression of the sense of faith. Because it is the task of the apostolic ministry to ensure that the Church remains in the truth of Christ and to lead her even more deeply into that truth, the pastors must promote the sense of the faith in all the faithful, examine and authoritatively judge the genuineness of its expression, and educate the faithful in an ever more mature evangelical discernment. Christian spouses and parents can and should offer their unique and irreplaceable contribution to the elaboration of an authentic evangelical discernment in the various situations and cultures in which men and women live their marriage and their family life. They are qualified for this role by their charism or specific gift, the gift of the sacrament of matrimony.
The situation of the family in the world today. The situation in which the family finds itself presents positive and negative aspects. The first are a sign of the salvation of Christ operating in the world. The second, a sign of the refusal that man gives to the love of God. On the one hand, in fact, there is a more lively awareness of personal freedom and greater attention to the quality of interpersonal relationships in marriage, to promoting the dignity of women, to responsible procreation, to the education of children. There is also an awareness of the need for the development of interfamily relationships, for reciprocal spiritual and material assistance, the rediscovery of the ecclesial mission proper to the family, and its responsibility for the building of a more just society. On the other hand, however, signs are not lacking of a disturbing degradation of some fundamental values. A mistaken theoretical and practical concept of the independence of the spouses in relation to each other, serious misconceptions regarding the relationship of authority between parents and children, the concrete difficulties that the family itself experiences in the transmission of values, the growing number of divorces, the scourge of abortion, the ever more frequent recourse to sterilization, the appearance of a truly contraceptive mentality. At the root of these negative phenomena, there frequently lies a corruption of the idea and the experience of freedom, conceived not as a capacity for realizing the truth of God's plan for marriage and the family, but as an autonomous power of self-affirmation, often against others, for one's own selfish well-being. Worthy of our attention also is the fact that in the countries of the so-called Third World, families often lack both the means necessary for survival, such as food, work, housing, and medicine, and the most elementary freedoms. In the richer countries, on the contrary, excessive prosperity and the consumer mentality paradoxically joined to a certain anguish and uncertainty about the future deprive married couples of the generosity and courage needed for raising up new human life. Thus, life is often perceived not as a blessing, but as a danger from which to defend oneself. The historical situation in which the family lives, therefore, appears as an interplay of light and darkness. This shows that history is not simply a fixed progression towards what is better, but rather an event of freedom, and even a struggle between freedoms that are in mutual conflict. That is, according to the well-known expression of St. Augustine, a conflict between two loves, the love of God to the point of disregarding self, and the love of self to the point of disregarding God. It follows that only an education for love, rooted in faith, can lead to the capacity of interpreting the signs of the times, which are the historical expression of this twofold love.
The influence of circumstances on the consciences of the faithful. Living in such a world under the pressures coming above all from the mass media, the faithful do not always remain immune from the obscuring of certain fundamental values, nor set themselves up as the critical conscience of family culture and as active agents in the building of an authentic family humanism. Among the more troubling signs of this phenomenon, the Synod Fathers stress the following, in particular, the spread of divorce and of recourse to a new union, even on the part of the faithful. The acceptance of purely civil marriage in contradiction to the vocation of the baptized to be married in the Lord. The celebration of the marriage sacrament without living faith. But for other motives, the rejection of the moral norms that guide and promote the human and Christian exercise of sexuality in marriage.
Our age needs wisdom. The whole church is obliged to a deep reflection and commitment so that the new culture now emerging may be evangelized in depth, true values acknowledged, the rights of men and women defended, and justice promoted in the very structures of society. In this way, the new humanism will not distract people from their relationship with God, but will lead them to it more fully. Science and its technical applications offer new and immense possibilities in the construction of such a humanism. Still, as a consequence of political choices that decide the direction of research and its applications, science is often used against its original purpose, which is the advancement of the human person. It becomes necessary, therefore, on the part of all, to recover an awareness of the primacy of moral values, which are the values of the human person as such. The great task that has to be faced today for the renewal of society is that of recapturing the ultimate meaning of life and its fundamental values. Only an awareness of the primacy of these values enables man to use the immense possibilities given him by science in such a way as to bring about the true advancement of the human person in his or her whole truth, in his or her freedom and dignity. Science is called to ally itself with wisdom. The following words of the Second Vatican Council can therefore be applied to the problems of the family. Our era needs such wisdom more than bygone ages if the discoveries made by man are to be further humanized. For the future of the world stands in peril unless wiser people are forthcoming. The education of the moral conscience, which makes every human being capable of judging and of discerning the proper ways to achieve self-realization according to his or her original truth, thus becomes a pressing requirement that cannot be renounced. Modern culture must be led to a more profoundly restored covenant with divine wisdom. Every man is given a share of such wisdom through the creating action of God, and it is only in faithfulness to this covenant that the families of today will be in a position to influence positively the building of a more just and fraternal world.
Gradualness and conversion. To the injustice originating from sin, which has profoundly penetrated the structures of today's world and often hindering the family's full realization of itself and of its fundamental rights, we must all set ourselves in opposition through a conversion of mind and heart, following Christ crucified by denying our own selfishness. Such as a conversion cannot fail to have a beneficial and renewing influence even on the structures of society. What is needed is a continuous, permanent conversion, which, while requiring an interior detachment from every evil and an adherence to good in its fullness, is brought about concretely in steps which lead us ever forward. Thus, a dynamic process develops, one which advances gradually from the progressive integration of the gifts of God and the demands of His definitive and absolute love in the entire personal and social life of man. Therefore, an educational growth process is necessary in order that individual believers, families, and peoples, even civilization itself, by beginning from what they have already received of the mystery of Christ, may patiently be led forward, arriving at a richer understanding and a fuller integration of this mystery in their lives.
Inculturation. In conformity with her constant tradition, the Church receives from the various cultures everything that is able to express better the unsearchable riches of Christ. Only with the help of all the cultures will it be possible for these riches to be manifested ever more clearly and for the Church to progress towards a daily more complete and profound awareness of the truth, which has already been given to her in its entirety by the Lord. Holding fast to the two principles of the compatibility with the gospel of the various cultures to be taken up, and of communion with the universal church, there must be further study, particularly by the episcopal conferences and the appropriate departments of the Roman Curia, and greater pastoral diligence so that this inculturation of the Christian faith may come about ever more extensively in the context of marriage and the family, as well as in other fields. It is by means of enculturation that one proceeds towards the full restoration of the covenant with the wisdom of God, which is Christ Himself. The whole Church will be enriched also by the cultures which, though lacking technology, abound in human wisdom and are enlivened by profound moral values. So that the goal of this journey might be clear and consequently the way plainly indicated, the Synod was right to begin by considering in depth the original design of God for marriage and the family. It went back to the beginning in deference to the teaching of Christ.
Part 2. The plan of God for marriage and the family. Man, the image of the God who is love. God created man in His own image and likeness, calling him to existence through love. He called him at the same time for love. God is love, and in Himself He lives a mystery of personal loving communion, creating the human race in His own image and continually keeping it being. God inscribed in the humanity of man and woman the vocation, and thus the capacity and responsibility of love and communion. Love is therefore the fundamental and innate vocation of every human being. As an incarnate spirit, that is a soul which expresses itself in a body, and a body informed by an immortal spirit, man is called to love in his unified totality. Love includes the human body, and the body is made a sharer in spiritual love. Christian revelation recognizes two specific ways of realizing the vocation of the human person in its entirety to love: marriage and the virginity or celibacy. Either one is, in its own proper form, an actuation of the most profound truth of man, of his being created in the image of God. Consequently, sexuality, by means of which man and woman gives themselves to one another through the acts which are proper and exclusive to spouses, is by no means something purely biological, but concerns the innermost being of the human person as such. It is realized in a truly human way only if it is an integral part of the love by which a man and woman commit themselves totally to one another until death. The total physical self-giving would be a lie if it were not the sign and fruit of a total personal self-giving, in which the whole person, including the temporal dimension, is present. If the person were to withhold something or reverse the possibility of deciding otherwise in the future, by this very fact he or she would not be giving totally. This totality, which is required by conjugal love, also corresponds to the demands of responsible fertility. This fertility is directed to the generation of a human being, and so by its nature, it surpasses the purely biological order and involves a whole series of personal values. For the harmonious growth of these values, a persevering and unified contribution by both parents is necessary. The only place in which this self-giving in its whole truth is made possible is marriage, the covenant of conjugal love freely and consciously chosen, whereby man and woman accept the intimate community of life and love willed by God himself, which only in this light manifests its true meaning. The institution of marriage is not an undue interference by society or authority, nor the extrinsic imposition of a form. Rather, it is an interior requirement of the covenant of conjugal love, which is publicly affirmed as unique and exclusive, in order to live in complete fidelity to the plan of God, the Creator. A person's freedom, far from being restricted by this fidelity, is secured against every form of subjectivism or relativism, and is made a sharer in creative wisdom.
Marriage and communion between God and people. The communion of love between God and people, a fundamental part of the revelation and faith experience of Israel, finds a meaningful expression in the marriage covenant which is established between a man and a woman. For this reason, the central word of revelation, God loves his people, is likewise proclaimed through the living and concrete word whereby a man and a woman express their conjugal love. Their bond of love becomes the image and the symbol of the covenant which unites God and his people. And the same sin which can harm the conjugal covenant becomes an image of the infidelity of the people to their God. Idolatry is prostitution. Infidelity is adultery. Disobedience to the law is abandonment of the spousal love of the Lord. But the infidelity of Israel does not destroy the eternal fidelity of the Lord, and therefore the ever-faithful love of God is put forward as the model of the faithful love which should exist between spouses.
Okay. Gosh, this is so good, Emily.
So good. How have I never read this before?
I know, because I don't have time.
That's it.
That's
Yes.
my cop-out anyway.
Especially knowing how long it is, I
Yeah.
would definitely agree. Because some encyclicals you can go to and, relatively quickly skim it at least. But this is something.
Yeah, this is
deep.
really good. It's great that it was written in the 80s, and like everything I feel like we read, I'm like totally applicable today.
Totally
spot on.
today. As if
Yep.
like I think about St. Paul VI in Humanae Vitae, and then this with St. John Paul II. They just knew. They just knew what we needed.
It speaks to the truth. The truth is eternal. Like it's always applicable, no matter when we're talking about it. Like if it's true, it's always true.
That's very good point.
And even the cultural, situation. It's just gotten more intense, I guess, if you will, like the destruction of the family from the 80s. But I feel like now it's it's interesting how different things have. I forget where it was in here because we had to read. We read a lot, but in one of the sections, I think one of the parts that's taxing to family life now is technology, right? And the distractions that has placed on just each individual person, but on family life, on just the nature of our relationships, right? Like to sit, to talk with each other, to have eye-to-eye contact, like to just not be doing anything, right? Like to have free space and not be like, oh, I have free space. Let me just pull out my phone to look something up. It's like, no, or we just like have free space, and just make room, because in doing that, we can just conversations can just come up, right? Our kids can just talk to us. And I feel like I've been noticing that lately is, at home, if every opportunity I have to, like, if I'm doing dishes or I'm in the middle of chores and my kids are playing, I'll like put an earbud in and listen to a podcast or something. And then if my kid starts to talk to me, I get annoyed and I'm like, I want to be listening to this. Like, you go play. And as opposed to recognizing, like, just feeling very convicted lately in my home that, like, in a sense, and this is maybe not the right way to think about it, but in a sense, like, I'm at work. Like, this is my job. This is my vocation. This is my life. This is how I'm giving and receiving. And so to be kind of zoning out or checking out of that, it's like I'm neglecting my responsibilities to my children, to my husband, and to myself. I'm missing out on those opportunities to grow, to be in relationship with another person. And really this is Joey and I were talking about this last night when we went out. It's like, one of my favorite parts about family is about parents is that you get to create culture and normality for your kids. And I just think that it's a profound responsibility, and it's also very fun. Like, Emily, like,
it's so fun.
Yeah. Especially when you come, like when you come from a certain background and you recognize you want to do something differently, that like your kids don't know about the background that you came, like about the experiences you had or whatever, like the world that your kids don't know that. Like they just know whatever you're creating in your home. Like they, like the saints are really people. Like we go to mass. Like, it's just like, this is just like what you do, And if you aren't doing this, like, I like that, like, it's not seen as, they don't think that we're weird. They think that other people are like, oh, they don't do that? Like, why don't they do that? Do you know what I mean, Emily? Like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, we were just talking before recording about, so our little girl, Isabella, her feast day, Isabella of France, the feast day is on the same day as the chair of St. Peter. And so we were just celebrating that and a couple of days ago. Now, they don't have the context behind why we do what we do, like you're saying, as far as the memories or that we had growing up. They don't know that, what we're doing in our home is because of X, Y, or Z. Maybe we didn't experience things like this and we want our kids to, or maybe there are some things that we pull from our childhood that were really beautiful that we're doing with our kids. And so you make a good point. Like they have no idea the reasoning behind what we're doing, which is kind of beautiful and very, helps keep everything so innocent. Because sometimes I can, speak personally, I do things because I definitely don't want it to be a certain way that I experienced, and I know there's always that idea that you're going to go so far forward that you end up doing exactly what you're trying not to do. And so it's kind of trying to keep all of that in check, I think, for sure. But when you were talking about the technology and honestly, your vocation being your job, I totally understand that. And I realize that it's making, when I do stuff like that, what you're talking about, because I do that all the time, I'm not available to my coworkers, so to speak, like if you think about if you were in a job and you're just constantly like with your earbuds in, and it's like, okay, my other people can't get what they need if they need something, without pestering me, quote unquote, pestering, And so I often find myself too, this is just a side note, but I often find myself, sometimes I'm on my phone doing something that pertains to whatever we're doing, but they don't know that. And so that happens very frequently for me. And so in my head, I'm just thinking, well, they have to, somehow they must understand that I'm trying to, work with what we're doing right here. And they have no idea. They're just dancing around thinking that I'm not looking at them. Did you see that, Mom? Did you see that? So anyway, there's so many things that, that really do pull us away from just being present. One thing I'd like to add is we went to brunch with some friends yesterday and we haven't seen them for a while. And one of their sons is our godson. And somehow we were just talking about how busy, I think because we hadn't seen them in longer than we would like, and just talking about how busy everyone is. And, the other mom was mentioning, like, I just say to my mom, like, I don't know how you did this, and I said, I have to think that things moved slower. Like, I just have to. And I remember that being the case too, even as a child, but I have to think, I know parents will always say, like, the days are long and the years are short or whatever. I get that perspective, but when it comes to the day in and day out, I have to think that things move slower. And a lot of reason, I think, is because of technology. Like, we are able, if we need a grocery item, we can get that immediately. And so instead of trying to remember those things we need to do, we just want to do them immediately so we don't forget. And so for me personally, it is so hard to be present, because if I'm not going ahead and doing the things that I'm thinking about, then I'm trying to tell myself to remember them. So then that's hard to be present. So I just think that there is so much distraction. And the first part of that, right, is just being aware. Like, if I can be better aware about that, then I feel like I can have better self-control, or at least pray for that,
Absolutely. I think the thing I got from a lot of this part of it so far is the importance of prioritizing family and like the family relationships. I remember I was listening to someone, I think it was on a different podcast. It was on a podcast, and she was talking about, that not every day do you need to set up a play date. I mean, especially when you have other kids, right? Like when you have a community, like you guys are the community, like letting your kids just be together, like really that family should take a priority. Like, right? Like we're going to do something as a family now, not always like, well, I want to go with this friend. I want to go with this friend. I want to go with this friend. It's like, no, like, or mom and dad, right? Like, I want to go do this, or I want to go do this. Like, okay, but like we're a unit, like we're in community here. You think of our brothers and sisters that are in religious life, and how, some religious orders, some are, cloistered orders, right? Like they are all they've got. Like they pray together, they work together, they eat together, they recreate together. I think those communities are just such a beautiful example for us of how to do family life, because what is family life? It's communal life, and I just really love that, because I think it also frees us as parents, frees me anyway, I think, to not cling to my children so tightly. Like my dreams for my kids, my hopes for my kids' personalities, and not to wear too much of like, their mistakes either, like their, things they struggle with, like not to put all that on me, because like I'm not them.
One thing that I was thinking of, and I would have to go back and look this up, you may know the answer to this, but this being released in 1981, written in 1980, I think is what we'll just say, released in 1981. I wonder when like IVF was really available to the mainstream. I would think it was, it was all happening behind the scenes at that time anyway. And so when he specifically is talking about life and being created within the marriage and conjugal love and all that, I just could imagine that being specific for a lot of things. I mean, we could talk about, a lot of different things besides IVF, but, he specifically talks about civil marriage. I just feel like he knew the way that things were going when it comes to homosexuality and, the way that the world was going to view, family life. And so I think so much of this is, meant to not have anything be gray, and everything is very black and white when it comes to this, and because it's truth. And I know that's hard, and I always think we have a friend that says, love the sinner, hate the sin, right? Like it doesn't mean we love our brothers and sisters any less, but we know what is true when it comes to marriage and family life. And this just really lays it out really beautifully.
Yeah. And I think, to bring up the vocation of a celibate for the kingdom, right? To be religious, to just be single, celibate, or to be married, that like, while it's black and white as to like what the terms are for, for sexuality and how we are to live that out, like the way that we're all called to live our lives though is very gray. Like there's so much, just because, certain people are called to marriage and family life. Well, not everybody is. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have a fulfilled life. You're called to love, right? Like, I think that was one of my favorite lines in this, was just that reminder of like, your vocation is to love. That's what your vocation is. And I remember that stood out. That was like such a linchpin for me when I was discerning my vocation and feeling called to marriage, but not dating anybody, and feeling like, why do I have this desire, but I'm not dating anybody? And feeling like I wanted like the desire ectomy, right? I'm like, God, just take this out of me if it's not your will. And I kind of getting a little bit of on the obsessive train about it. And then remembering, today, if I die today, I'm not going to be held responsible or account for something that was not a reality of my life. Like, I'm not married. I'm not going to be held to fault for not being married today. My vocation is not marriage, right? Today, my vocation is to love. And eventually that was called in the context of marriage. And I think that that's just like a really good reminder for me, is that like, I'm called to love, and today it's in this context, right? Like the principle of subsidiarity, like the closest people to me is where I have to start that call is here with my family, with God, and with my family, my husband and my children. So I just love this. I think it's just setting us up with this focus on family life, and like that your family is a unit, it's a community. He even uses the word charism in there, that like we've all, like each family, that's one thing I love about getting together with other families, is you just see the different charisms, right? Like, wow, this family is really good at whatever it is, hospitality. And this family is very joyful. They love to play. They're very silly. This family is very studious. Like, wow, all of their parents are, doctors and lawyers, and their kids are doing all these great, amazing, intellectual things. And I just feel like there's just, everyone's doing something different, because that's what we need. God just needs these little units, and then he just sends us out, like these little tribes in the world on this evangelical mission, right? Of like, you live your vocation in the world, and that will be a light in the world and draw other people to me, remembering that it's all about that love of God, the community we're trying to form of life, of love, forgiveness, healing, joy, sadness, all the things, right? Like, and
All,
right.
yeah, to
Yeah.
build up the kingdom, right?
Right.
Like that, yeah.
And I love that he talks about conversion and the need, right? Gradualness and conversion. I love this section because it reminds me of like to stay in my own lane. Like, I can't change anyone else, but by God's grace, like my life, like I can work to change my heart through prayer and through my works, quote unquote, in that like my effort to choose virtue over vice every day, right? In those little moments, like that perpetual call to conversion, and how if mom and dad, right? Like the power of the parents, just to pray. Like, I pray for Joey's conversion every day. I pray for my conversion every day. Like the holier we can get as parents, the better our family will be, Emily?
So
like,
true. So true.
That's like definitely my focus this Lent is like,
Yeah.
Lord, and it should be every penitential season,
Yeah.
right? Is how do we become more like God? How do we my heart become more like God, and more conversion? So
I think you were mentioning about the vocation to love and that sort of thing. There was something I read in preparation for recording this, and it was about Pope Benedict referring to the definition of freedom. And, we think freedom is just meant to be that we can do whatever we want. But ultimately, and I'll send you this because it was a really short little thing on a website. I think the Catholic thing, that's a good little website. Yeah. Anyways, it talks about that freedom is the freedom to serve another. Mm-hmm. So, and ultimately in serving another, we are serving God. And ultimately that comes down to loving our neighbor as ourselves, like the golden rule, and just how all of that is connected to freedom, which he talks about so much of freedom in this encyclical. So anyway, it was just it was a really good little article. I'll send it to you.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I can share it in the show notes too.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah,
okay.
this is really interesting. I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, me too. It's really great. It's a good reminder. I feel like this is going to be like a pep talk and like a convicting, almost like if I was hearing him read this, it would be, yes, both consoling and convicting at the same time of like, that's right. What I'm doing every day is powerful. Like it is impacting the world,
And it
my
matters.
marriage, my family.
Yeah,
Yes. Like that this matters. It matters so much. And maybe it's not 100 people, right? But it is, especially like our children, right? Like it is forming these people and then they'll go out, hopefully, right? It's the ripple effect idea of like, it just, they go out and then they each impact a few people and then they each impact a few people. It's just, yeah, it's how that works. I just find that to be, just a good reminder. Like, that's right. Our family matters. Our family culture matters. Being able to set that up with your spouse of like, what does our family culture look like? What do we prioritize? What do we value spiritually? What does our prayer life look like? Just all these things. Like, I hope we find joy in that. Like,
yes, it's exciting.
Yes, Emily, right? Like you said, there is black and white, but there's also a lot of gray, right? Like that God called you and Josh together. And I think within a boundary, he's kind of like, okay, guys, like from your personalities, like you guys, like golf is very much a part of your family culture. Like fantastic, or I don't know, whatever it is, like theater, movies, like music, just whatever, I just think that's, sports, however, literature, whatever it is, like, that's just so cool. Outdoors, right? Hiking, camping.
Yeah.
Like, so cool. Like, that's just
it makes me excited to start the day today.
I know, me too.
Who knows what the day will bring?
Right. Like little rituals and little habits that just make our family life unique and holy. And that's the last thing I just wanted to share is just like the life of God, of Christ, to be so humble, to touch every part so that everything really does matter. And I think this is why Satan would want us to be so distracted, right? Is that like, well, no, what I'm doing in this moment isn't as powerful as what I want to be doing here or what I'm thinking about over here or this, event on this other part of the world that really is not impacting me at all. And like all of these things, it's like, but in this very instant, right? Practicing the presence of God, like brother, who is it? Brother Lawrence? Brother Lawrence.
Yeah.
Like, no, this very act I'm doing, Christ did these very simple acts in family life and daily life that like there's holiness to be found here. It's important to be present for it. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like I realize there's holiness.
Yeah.
But I need to realize I need to be present for it.
Right. But I really love listening to podcasts while I'm cleaning. This is the tear,
we're human, so we can only continue to strive for holiness, right?
Yes. And thank you that we have Lent to help us do that.
Amen.
So, all right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye, Emily.
Bye.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.